Welcome to the Juice Consumer Direct Podcast. I'm Nate Clegg, and I'm here with Carson Poppenger and our first official guest at our new studio, Vince Romney. Thank you for joining us. He is a cybersecurity professional, and we're super excited to have you here at the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, Carson, why don't you kick it off and tell us why we're doing this one?
Yeah, so we've had a long relationship with Vince over the last 5 years. Vince has handled a lot of security for us. He's really helped us up-level our game. And as we're talking about, the consumer direct marketing business and the clients that we work with, the different marketing channels that we're in, a lot of them, everyone has concerns about security. And how do you make sure that the project you're handling is secure, data flow, APIs, all the information kind of that travels all over back and forth now. It's super important to make sure you have a good security posture. Vince has been a critical part of that for us, kind of operates as our fractional CISO, Chief Information Security Officer. Whenever we have any kind of question from a client or something like that, we always lean on Vince. And Vince's company, Digital Defense Security, they've been a great partner to us at Squeeze. And I thought, who better to have on our show to talk about security than Vince Romney. So welcome, Vince.
Thanks, man. Looking forward to it. Always good chatting with you.
What else should our listeners know about you, Vince, before we deep dive some of the questions that we have and we think some of our clients and potential clients might have?
Well, I think, first off, yes, security is my life, but just like everyone else, I have all sorts of other passions and things that keep me busy. But really, I love what I do so much that people talk about when you're going to retire. I don't know that I will do that anytime soon, for sure. Because to me, this whole information security world has so many different aspects. You can't be an expert in everything. And there's always something new to learn, and there's always people to interact with and grow. And I just got back from Black Hat 2 weeks ago, and I just couldn't believe how much I learned in the course of just 3 days of being down in Vegas. So to me, InfoSec, just like technology in general, evolving very quickly, always out at the fringes of what's happening. My whole track down there was AI. We were looking into how we need to, as security professionals, look at that through that lens.
No, like one thing that I wanted to kind of make a point at the beginning of this pod is that, we're not neither Nate or I are security experts. We're more on the business side, marketing, and so same with our audience. A lot of our audience, aren't necessarily information security professionals. So the stuff we're going to talk about here, I think, is like we want to really understand what it means and how it applies to the business without probably getting too overly technical. So, if you guys that are watching this, if you're watching this from a technical security lens, you may want us to dive deeper on some things or may have some thoughts or comments or some, critique or whatever. But, we're just trying to keep this more at a high level. Yeah. And I think you'll come away with some really good information about, like, what can we do? What should we be looking at? Where should we be searching for potential security risks, and how do we go about approaching those?
Yeah, and I think I'd like to make sure that we come out of this with security as a business enabler. And maybe people are going to go, wait, what? But really, I believe that security done properly is a business enabler. It's what makes it possible for us to, as a business, confidently go forward, generate revenue, do all the things, and know that the back end is taken care of, that if somebody does manage to, fish someone successfully or penetrate something that was left open, an open port or whatever, that you've got the resiliency, the controls within the overall system to deal with it and not get shut down.
Yeah, well, let's deep dive that a little bit. And because we talked about it earlier, and I thought that was a really interesting idea because, what we always see, and we even talked about it today, we had an executive strategy meeting, and we were discussing how we have somebody on our team who's in charge of security, and they're great at it, and they're a stickler, and sometimes they don't feel heard because they come up with rules and things, and what we do as a team, and we're trying to stick to that, and we never want them to feel like, hey, we're ignoring you, because we're trying our best always to stick to the plan, to stick to security measures. So what are some examples of things that might hurt the business, or some things that might help the business or enable the business, like you just said?
Sure. I think first off, I'm going to use the extreme example.
Yeah.
I can make sure that Squeeze or any other business has zero chance of a data breach. and I'm going to make your data completely unavailable and unusable. Okay, you won't have a data breach, guaranteed it. Okay, but it will also be unusable. That's that kind of weird extreme that I think mentally some cybersecurity professionals come out of their career tracks kind of thinking that's my job, is to make it secure. That's not your job. As a security professional, your job is to enable the business and make the security controls match the risk appetite of the business. So I work with Carson, I work with the whole team to say, what is the appetite? What's the level of loss you can incur? What can happen to your company? We do these risk assessments and define that. What can happen to your company and you'll still be okay? Okay? Everything below that, that's what I need to cover. Okay?
Yeah, it's like you're never going to lose any data if you don't have any, so let's just not have data. But the world we operate in today, like data is key. It's everything. Yeah, it's just growing by the minute, by the second. So,
and one of the things we talked about earlier too, and it was super informational. We chatted for a little bit before the podcast, and I learned a lot immediately, which was awesome. Is to consider your company size when you're coming up with your security program. Yeah. So, how big of a company do you need to be until you like really take it super seriously, or at what stage of your company's existence do you need to really dive in and talk to somebody like you?
So, I think, again, Vince's perspective.
Yeah.
If I were to stand up a website and start transacting business on it, maybe I was selling widgets out of my garage, I should be considering security at that point, but only within the scope of that. Right? I don't need a SIM, which is a security incident and event management system, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars a year base. All right, that's outside of scope, right? I'm just selling widgets out of my garage. So it's that idea that we talked about, building my security to the level of that. The other thing, though, that I shouldn't do is ignore security. Hey, I just got a website. I'm selling widgets. I got a little form. I collect a credit card. It's all good. If I'm taking that attitude, the way the bad guys work now, this is no longer some dude in a hoodie in a basement. All right, this does not exist. These are corporations that conduct cybercrime. These are full-on hundreds of employees, CEO, CFO, COO, big organizations, and they conduct cybercrime. That's what they do, and they have bots that just scan. The minute a port opens, an IP goes live, they're going to pick up on that and just sniff it. Okay, if it's buttoned up reasonably well, the logic behind it is kind of like a trust algorithm, but the opposite. And it goes, that's buttoned up. We'll just keep moving on. They're looking for the easy pickings. If you happen to be that easy picking, even though it's just you, your computer, and some widgets in your garage, they're going to pwn you as best they can, and they're going to try to extract money out of you.
So what you're telling me is you can't fly under the radar,
no
matter how
that's
big
not
or
a thing.
small
Yeah, it's just not a
is.
possibility. Could you be lucky? Absolutely. And just getting back from Vegas, luck's a thing, right? If you're playing blackjack, you can kind of have a hand in your luck. If you're playing roulette, guess what? The odds are in the house's favor.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious. These companies, these very sophisticated cybersecurity, well, not cybersecurity, cybercrime people, where are they? Like, how are they functioning under the radar like that?
They're not under the radar. We know who they are.
Okay.
They have names called APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, and then there's some nomenclature beyond that, and CrowdStrike will come up with a name, or somebody else will come up with a name, and they call them that. But each one of those names applies to one of those organizations. And most of them are in Russia, North Korea, Iran, China has a bunch, but really China's less about cybercrime, more about information gathering.
Yeah.
Just get all the stuff.
So there's somewhere where we can't get to them, or the
they're beyond the reach of our capability. I mean, we've arrested a few of them, which is kind of cool to see Interpol and the FBI and all the other organizations come together and do a sting and take some down. But it's a small fraction of who's actually doing the work.
Yeah, sometimes I like to say, like, maybe we could just find out where they're at and send a Scud missile there or something. Just maybe we should be looking at it from that level. They're so problematic, in the way they're, targeting people.
I think the real challenge is that it's now in the trillions of dollars a year that is generated in cybercrime.
That's wild.
It's massive.
That is very massive.
Extortion.
Well, we've seen it in the news over and over again, companies having their data breached. And when that happens, when a company's data is breached, and it probably depends on the company and what information they have, what does a consumer do, or what happens to them? Where's that money? It's in the trillions of dollars. where are they getting their money from once they breach that
So
information?
the bad guys are getting it generally through extortion or sale of stolen property, whether that's data, whether that's trade secrets, whatever. So the bad guys are doing it that way. And keep in mind, that number, cybercrime that I mentioned, trillions, also includes illicit drug trade, human trafficking, all the negative, terrible human stuff that goes on. That's all part of cybercrime because it's perpetrated through cyber means. But when it comes to like hacking a business and getting money, well, sometimes I can actually hack the business and get money. Okay,
Yeah.
if I manage to figure out how to get you as the controller to send me money by tricking you into thinking that I'm your vendor, and I send you a bill, and you go, "Yep, there's the bill." Click, click, click. Away goes, a wire for $100,000. I win. That alone is a several $billion-a year industry, just tricking controllers into sending money.
We've stopped a few of those in their tracks when they were happening. Thankfully, we haven't fallen prey to that. But we're doing some things with some of our technology you've advised us on to help train our people to detect those things and to catch them so that we can stop them in their tracks so that it doesn't end up going through approval processes and things. One of the things that I think about and wanted to talk about too is like you've helped us grow from relatively small business to where we are today and helping us up-level our security posture. And that's been a tremendous asset to us as we've grown. We've gotten our SOC 2. We're going to talk about that a little bit. What SOC 2 is, as a financial services vendor to financial services companies, that they want to see that we have the SOC 2 certification, and we've had that now for 4 years. This is our 4th year with SOC 2, and so we've increased the scope of that. We've increased the levels and the layers of software we've added. But let's talk a little bit about that and what that, where we were when we started and kind of like how you've seen that evolution working with Squeeze.
Well, I think one of the things that when we first joined you guys, working with you, you were scrappy, still kind of building up reputation, building clientele, and so operating lean and mean. And I think that goes back to that earlier comment. We need to make sure that security matches that level. So we're not spending $1,000 to save $100, that kind of model. So we started in that engagement just as a security consultant, but then very quickly the requirement for SOC came down. And as a background, SOC is from AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. And early on in their world, they had SAS 70, which was a way to validate that a company had good financial controls and reporting capability. As companies started serving each other and started trading data and started really integrating IT systems, they realized there was need for more. So in '92, they dropped SOC, the Service Organizational Controls. And they dropped Type 1, which was financial reporting, just like SAS 70 had been, but then they dropped Type 2. Type 2 was CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, privacy, InfoSec. So those categories were all covered in Type 2. And then, of course, they had Type 1 and 2 for both of those, which is point in time, I'm going to take a snapshot of your environment and see what it looks like, and then I'm going to take one over a period of 6 months or a year and audit the whole year and see what it looks like. So when we started with you guys, we did a Type 2, a SOC 2 Type 1. We got you your snapshot. And I think for most companies, that's a great way to start, because if you launch all the way into 2, one of the challenges that is now you've got to build that reputation over a whole year of all of the artifacts. Type 1 lets you get a certification, Type 1 of SOC 2 lets you get that certification.
Baseline, yeah.
And then work from there to make sure that all those controls. So that's what we did with your org, was build out that competency in your team.
That was a great way for us to kind of step into it and get our feet wet, learn what do we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And that was a great way for us to get started with that. That was back 4 years ago.
Yeah, and it really, I think the thing I watched was as the company evolved, you started very SaaS-based, we don't really have any physical assets. We just have this kind of process. And then very quickly as you grew, you started having to have these physical assets, obviously the location, the server rooms. You had to start building out more and more things, including software, to support it. And that means the scope grows. So one thing that you guys have been navigating very well is that as the scope grows, you've got to make those same principles apply to the new environments. Your software development lifecycle had to suddenly become controlled. Because you're like, oh yeah, we're under SOC. Therefore, we need to make sure there are controls here that we can audit, that we have artifacts that can come back and show the auditor, here's what we do. So
there's a lot of documentation that we do now. Like that's
huge.
Yeah.
And again, SOC isn't security, but you've been really good about taking it in its context. Some people will take SOC and say, I just want that ticket. I want to check that box and be done. You can still be very insecure and tick that box.
Well, our team, who are over security in general and SOC, do take it seriously, and they go beyond scope. Mm-hmm. And the other day I was writing on this tablet, right, that I have, and Carson has one too, and he just put in his passcode. The reason why we have passcodes on these in general is because our security team came by and was like, hey, look at that thing. That's got information in it. Does it have a password on it? And I was like, maybe. And they're like, put a password on it. So they're taking it seriously all the way down to like note-taking level. So our team's all over it for sure. And I can say that as we bring on new clients, or as I'm talking to prospective clients, as we're going through the benefits or the things that Squeeze does really well, there's always this sigh of relief when I say that we're SOC 2 certified. Mm-hmm. So we talk about it at the beginning of some of the calls, just so that they know from the get-go, this is a company I can trust. They've done SOC 2 at least. That's an indicator of where they are and what they want to be doing for us as a business, for sure.
Yeah, I know, like, some of my biggest concerns as the business owner, one of the biggest vulnerabilities that I see, you mentioned one earlier when we were chatting as well, which is password manager and password processes and things, making sure that's like a real low-hanging fruit for these thieves, right? And the other one is, as you mentioned, the financial crimes, where someone sends through, we've had that happen to us, where it was like an invoice comes in to our accounting saying, hey, we've got these overdue legal bills from last year that need to be paid. And like, oh yeah, I guess we probably didn't need to get these legal bills paid. And then they send it through. Someone says, yeah, that's probably from so-and-so. They approve it. And then pretty soon there's a payment entered into the banking system. And it's like, thankfully we have checks and balances along the way so that we can kind of review that before that payment's authorized. We've checked off and we know that that's actually a valid, expense and payment and everything like that. There's been a number of stories in the news about, there was a city that lost over, it was like $1 million or something like that they just wire transferred $1 million to somebody, thinking that it's a legit bill. And you can't get it back.
They're very sophisticated about how they do it now, too. It's not quite as blunt as just sending you an invoice out of the blue. Everything's primed. Sometimes they'll hack their way into like your Outlook and then become Carson. And Carson sends a very immediate email to you and says, we got to do this now. And, it becomes that, or spoofs your phone number and texts you, we got to do this now. Can you take care of it immediately? That kind of thing. And just having that checks and balance that you guys have already implemented, that, no, we don't do anything without a phone call, a voice confirmation, and then another person in the loop.
Yeah, we've actually had some of those happen where they haven't spoofed our emails or anything like that, but they have basically faked an email. And it says it's from Carson Poppenger saying, oh, I need you to do this thing right away. And I'm like, yeah, nice try, dude. But so we've dealt with a little bit of that, but we're always kind of on it. Fortunately, we haven't had.
That's where that training that you guys have instituted. The past 3 years, you've been doing a lot of that training. Yeah. And I think that's really beneficial because especially in your org where there is a lot of transition, your core team's all the same, but you got people coming in and out on the call center, giving them that initial training when they first join your company is awesome because they come in with the context of, Squeeze actually wants me to care about this stuff. So even down at the call center level, you've got people whose mind is in the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what training's all about. It's just keeping your mind in the game. You're never going to know all the things, but your spidey sense will go off.
Yeah. Keep an eye for it.
And one of the things we talked about earlier too is you said basically the idea is trust but verify, right? You can't just trust that something's happening. You have to make sure is the case. Do you have any examples of things that you've seen that people have basically trusted that it was happening, but it clearly wasn't, and it ended up being a major failure point for the company?
Well, I'm going to go back and say I had a different relationship with another company. The CEO absolutely implicitly trusted that he was getting what he needed out of the security team and never questioned things along the way, especially in a smaller org. Now, if you're a major enterprise, multi-billion dollar with 10,000 employees or whatever, harder to do. okay? But you can still get confirmation by asking for artifacts. You become the auditor in a sense, or at least you're enabling the auditing to come up and give you that reporting that goes into it. And to do that, you need to know enough. Like, Carson, you and I have worked long enough together, you kind of know what should be happening. You have the context. You don't know the technical stuff, it's not your job. But you have the context of how do I protect my business? And what are the things that should be happening to protect my business? So in that case, I had a CEO that was plugging along. We were working with someone under the CEO. The messaging was never getting up that there was a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. And it was never making it up chain. And when things went really south, I got a call saying, what's going on? Didn't even call that guy, talk to me, because I was a consultant. And I'm going, I've got a whole slew of emails. You want me to forward them? He says, yes, please. So forwarded all the emails up. And unfortunately, that dude lost his job, but it was for a reason. But it was also kind of the CEO's fault. Don't trust but verify.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's tough. Like in this, as we have all of our, everybody within the organization has their own areas of responsibility to help grow the business and run the business. And a lot of times, you hear this kinds of things with dealing with legal departments, where it's like, oh, the sales prevention team or whatever, sort of a funny.
It sure feels that way sometimes.
With legal.
Yeah.
And I think, info security, a little bit the same
the
too.
Department
where it's
of No,
like,
that's what we've been called,
Yeah, and so you have that sort of like, rap of like being anti-business or something like that. So like people are still trying to like move the business forward and get things done. And you don't want to sidestep these security things. You don't want to overlook them because it can come back and it can create a huge problem for the organization and for everybody and put us all at risk, right? And so, no, I think that, I think this has been a great discussion so far. And I'm just, thinking about like, as far as like recommendations on, SOC 2, where do you think where should we be looking next? After we've achieved our SOC 2 and we got these things done. Do you have any sort of thoughts or things that we should be looking at implementing?
So I think one of the things we do for you guys each year is we build out that risk assessment, and we go through and we kind of re-look at the company through fresh eyes. So generally, we won't even look at the old risk assessment. We'll just take our template again and walk through the company one more time. Out of that come things that we go, here, and here could use improvement. I think SOC 2 is a great certification, but you can also look at things like ISO 27001 and say, how does that fit?
It's like a security standard, right?
Yeah, it's a standard for just overall security operations. Now, I think Squeeze is too, and I would advise that, Squeeze is too small yet to really take that as something, but that's something to put as a North Star, to say, what? We grow to X, it actually will be applicable. The other thing is you do a major data change. i.e., right now your data is U.S.-based, so you're all within that sphere of regulatory compliance. If you start doing something internationally, suddenly that changes, and that's where you have to start looking at your organization and saying, maybe I need to actually have a specialty group, so a data privacy group. Because now I'm dealing with regulations in a different country, a different region, domain, that can cause me some serious hurt. So you get involved with GDPR over in Europe. Those regulators are tenacious. If you have anything awry and it comes to their knowledge, they will come down on you, and they can charge up to 4% of your gross as the fine.
Wow,
it's a lot.
So you think about gross. Well, that doesn't. They're not saying no. We won't. We'll let you have your profit, or we won't kill that. No, it's your gross. And so if you're running a 3% profit margin on some companies do, right? They run a pretty lean profit margin.
It's gone.
That's gone.
If you're doing gross, it's gone at that point. Well, I think it's time for some final thoughts, and some of my takeaways from our conversation have been some thoughts that I've always kind of had is what you follow up on is what's important to you, right? And that's what you signal to your organization. And that's what Carson's done today, right? He's brought you on, he follow-ups on these things, he brings it up. So cybersecurity is important to us, and it's important to remember to do those sort of things. And as a salesperson, maybe not get so upset if legal or security is trying to push back on some sort of deal that we're putting together, but to appreciate it. And then my other takeaway is it's nice to have somebody who has business sense at the same time as security sense or legal sense. So it's good to talk to somebody like you, Vince, who has this sort of mindset of hey, I understand that you have a business. I understand your business. At the same time, I want to protect you. And it's the proper balance in those situations to put together a security system or plan that makes the most sense. What do you think, Carson?
Yeah, I think it's been great. And thanks for being here, Vince. I think this is exactly the kind of conversation a lot of our clients and our audience, have questions about. It's something that's important to them. They're dealing a lot with the InfoSec teams within their own organizations, making sure that we can move forward, generate revenue, and also maintain security standards that we don't have any issues. And, I think that your insights and everything are great. My takeaway is, making sure password manager, low-hanging fruit, you mentioned that. I think
such low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, making sure that everyone's on password managers and that passwords are secure and not repetitive, not overused, right? That was something that you hit on before we actually even started talking. And then, just making sure that we continue to evolve security as the business grows, that security has to evolve with it, and you have to be looking at all these different points of failure.
Yeah, I think it's in dealing with large companies, boards of directors and things, it's always interesting to me that sometimes that question comes as, hold on, we already invested in this. Yeah, but the company grew. The company changed. And just like everything else, you're not using the same tech stack today that you were 5 years ago. Cyber is the same process. I always keep that in mind.
What are your final thoughts or parting wisdom that you have for us?
I think we were talking about it before. Password managers are underrated. I think it's one of those things where I spent 23 years in the Air Force, and when we started into full-time cyber, we did cyber operations, and anytime we were successful in taking advantage of an organization or a network, I'd say 99% of the time it's because we managed to leverage passwords. We rarely had to do a technical hack. It was generally just manipulating somebody to give up their password and or just find it.
If people want to get a hold of you and engage you in your services, how can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way is just hit me on LinkedIn. I am literally the only Vincent Romney on LinkedIn. So just look me up, ping me on there, and happy to provide any advice I can.
Awesome. Well, Vince, thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Glad to be here, guys.
We're very grateful for your time and for your efforts that you've had for Squeeze thus far. I'm Nate Clegg, and you've been watching the Juice Consumer Direct podcast, and we're thankful for you guys watching it too.
Would really love your comments. Make sure you comment on this and on LinkedIn and on the different platforms you watch. Make sure you like it, subscribe, and keep following us. We're going to keep bringing you more good content.